Welcome to the Open Meeting Law Refresher webinar with the Data Practices Office. I think we're going to go ahead and get started, so thank you for joining us. Okay, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Data Practices Office is a small office in the Department of Administration, and we are a statewide resource on data practices and the open meeting law. Most of what we do is respond to questions related to those laws from members of the public and government. We help the Commissioner of Administration with issuing advisory opinions, and we also provide legislative assistance and training. All of our webinars are recorded, so if you missed part of today's webinar or want to go back and watch one of our prior series or share a video with a friend, they are posted on the Data Practices Office YouTube page, and I'll show you how to find those videos on our website, which is actually the link on this slide here. Okay, so this is the Data Practices Office website, where you can find a lot of different resources about data practices as well as the open meeting law. You can always find our YouTube page at the bottom of this page, or on the bottom of any page on our website at the footer by clicking on this YouTube icon. You can also go to our news and events and then go to the webinars page. And you'll also be able to find the YouTube channel link here. Also on this page, you can find any FAQs or an FAQ about any audio issues you might be having. So if you do have trouble during the webinar hearing, certainly click on that and you can find some, kind of troubleshooting topics there. Also on this page, we do have presentations from our past webinars. So you can find the slides here. Just clicking on one of those tabs, you can find those here. So let's go to our YouTube channel page. Okay, so this is our YouTube page where you can find all of our videos from our different presentations and webinars. We'll be recording this webinar again, and then this will be posted within the next couple of days. We also have videos on law enforcement data, government personnel data, data practices, potpourri, just general questions, as well as kind of a broader series on the open meeting law with some more general information. Okay, if you'd like to download a copy of today's PowerPoint slides, I'm going to share a file with you right now that you can download and save to your computer. Just give me one moment, please. Okay, so that should be available for you to download through that pop-up window there. I'll also show the slides near the end of the webinar for anyone who joins later or misses it this time around. This PowerPoint will also be posted on our website, so you can get a copy of these slides there as well within the next couple of days. Okay, for today's agenda, we've been receiving several open meeting law questions during the past few months. So today's webinar will be a brief refresher on requirements related to holding open meetings during the pandemic, and we'll also spend some time discussing the different types of remote meeting options that can be held in accordance with the open meeting law. As usual, we'll leave some time for a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Feel free to send in your questions as you think of them by using the Q&A panel on your screen. When sending in questions, please send them to all panelists so we can be sure to see them. One other quick note before moving forward, today's session is going to focus primarily on remote meeting requirements. We did hold a multi-part series of webinars that focused on the general requirements of the open meeting law, which you could see on the YouTube page previously, and the recordings of those sessions are available there. Be sure to check those out for some additional guidance about the open meeting law. Also, we'll be holding a half-day open meeting law remote workshop via WebEx in January. And that's where we'll actually take a deep dive into the open meeting law and several of those requirements. So definitely keep your eyes open for an email from us advertising that workshop because seats are limited. All right, as I'm sure you all know, public bodies subject to the open meeting law must continue to meet the requirements of that law despite the ongoing pandemic. There's not a special provision in the open meeting law that permits a public body to close its regular meetings solely due to a health emergency. So the requirements of the open meeting law have remained in place during the pandemic, and they include, for example, holding meetings so that they are open to the public, adhering to the applicable notice requirements for regular, special, and emergency meetings, and closing meetings only in certain circumstances. Again, you can find some more info about these requirements in recordings of our past webinars. Obviously, holding open in-person meetings during a pandemic isn't exactly safe. The state legislature has accounted for this possibility, though, and public bodies are able to hold meetings remotely so long as certain conditions are met. Specifically, Minnesota Statutes 13D.021 permits all state-level or local public bodies to hold meetings by telephone or other electronic means so long as certain conditions are met. But just a note before walking through these conditions, the term other electronic means is not defined. So audio and visual platforms or other types of similar applications can certainly fall within this definition, which the Commissioner of Administration has previously opined about in Advisory Opinion 13-009. Again, that citation for people taking notes, 13-009. So examples of these audiovisual platforms include Skype, Zoom, and WebEx, and I imagine that there are several other applications that public bodies have found useful and are using to host these meetings. Okay, now to the conditions. First, the presiding officer, chief legal counsel, or chief administrative officer for the public body must determine that an in-person meeting of the members of the public body or meeting by interactive TV under 13D.02 is not practical or prudent because of a health pandemic or Chapter 12 emergency. So this is really the threshold decision for whether your body should be holding meetings under 13D.021. In other words, you need to determine whether members of the public body meeting with each other in person at its regular location is safe. If it's not safe for the members to gather because of a pandemic or other Chapter 12 emergency, then a remote meeting under 13D.021 is probably in order. This requirement is easily satisfied at the moment because Governor Walz declared a Chapter 12 emergency in March, and it does remain in effect. However, our office suggests that public bodies memorialize or document that they are meeting pursuant to 13D.021 in some way. But what that exactly looks like, such as a resolution or some type of motion, can really vary based on internal processes and procedures for each body. Second, members of the body must be able to hear one another as well as all discussion or testimony that's provided during the meeting. Obviously, several remote meeting platforms offer additional services and functions beyond voice channels. So if you do decide to employ these other features, such as a chat function or Q&A functions, you will want to be sure that you do so in a way that complies with the open meeting law. Okay, for the next two requirements, I'm going to discuss these together. Members of the public who are attending at the regular meeting location must be able to hear all discussion. Also, at least one member, the chief legal counsel or the chief administrative officer of the public body, must be physically present at the regular meeting location. However, both of these requirements are contingent on whether attendance at the regular meeting location is feasible due to the health pandemic or emergency declaration. Given the fact that the pandemic is ongoing and many social distancing guidelines remain in place, it's not likely feasible to have members of your public body or members of the public, be physically present at the regular meeting location. Again, you'll likely want to document or memorialize your decision that in-person attendance at the regular meeting location is not feasible. Finally, all votes must be taken by roll call. There are two other requirements to keep in mind when you're holding meetings under 13D.021. First, public bodies must allow remote public monitoring if practical, and public bodies are permitted to charge members of the public for costs related to providing additional connections to monitor the meeting remotely. However, there are several low-cost options available for web meetings that allow additional connections at no extra cost. So in the spirit of transparency and accountability, our office has been encouraging public bodies to use meeting tools that will allow the public to observe meetings and public business without being cost prohibitive. Second, the usual meeting notice requirements still apply based on the type of meeting being held. So be sure to look at the requirements of 13D.04 as you're holding meetings under 13D.021 so that you are still properly noticing meetings to the public. Also, the notice must include the fact that some members may be participating electronically, as well as provide information to the public about how to attend the meeting remotely. Okay, over the course of the past few months, we've had a lot of different public bodies reach out to our office to let us know that they've found remote meetings under 13D.021 to be pretty convenient and efficient for their members. And so we've had several questions as to whether remote meetings can continue after the pandemic ends. The short answer is yes. 13D.015 and 13D.02 do allow public bodies to hold remote meetings. But there are different requirements for holding meetings under these sections that may influence whether you are able or will want to hold such remote meetings. So let's walk through those requirements really quickly. Let's start with Minnesota Statutes 13D.015, which allows state-level entities to hold meetings by telephone or other electronic means so long as certain conditions are met. In other words, local public bodies, such as county commissions, city councils, or local school boards, for example, cannot use 13D.015 to hold meetings by telephone. This section is reserved solely for state entities who are required to hold open meetings. All right, the conditions that a state-level entity must meet in order to hold an open meeting by telephone include: all members of the participating entity must be able to hear all discussion and testimony regardless of their physical locations. Next, all members of the public who are attending the meeting at the regular location must be able to hear all discussion and all votes of the entity's members. Additionally, members of the public must be able to participate in testimony when applicable. Next, at least one member of the entity must be physically present at the meeting location, at the regular meeting location. And then finally, all votes must be conducted by roll call. There are also two other important requirements to note. Again, the entity must, to the extent practical, permit members of the public to monitor the meeting remotely. Additionally, state-level entities holding meetings by telephone must specifically provide notice that some members may be participating by electronic means. The entity must also post the notice that some members may be participating electronically on its website at least 10 days in advance of a regular meeting where members will be attending by telephone. So, to recap the big highlights, only state-level entities can hold meetings by telephone under 13D.015, and there are some additional notice requirements that must be followed when state-level entities hold an open meeting when any member attends by telephone. Okay, let's turn to Minnesota Statutes 13D.02, which permits any public body to hold meetings by interactive television so long as certain conditions are met. To clarify, the definition of interactive television does include online applications such as WebEx or Skype, which is discussed in Advisory Opinions 13-009 and 18-019. Again, those citations are 13-009 and 18-019. So the conditions include: all members must be able to hear each other as well as all discussion or testimony. Members of the public who are at the meeting location must be able to hear all discussion and testimony as well as be able to hear all votes of the body's members. At least one member of the body must be physically present at the meeting location. Finally, each location where a member of the body is present must be open and accessible to the public. However, there are a couple of exceptions to this requirement. First, the location of the member doesn't need to be open to the public so long as that particular member has not participated remotely in a 13D.02 meeting from an inaccessible place more than 3 times, and the member is serving in the military and happens to be at a required drill, deployed, or on active duty. Alternatively, the location doesn't need to be open to the public so long as the member has not participated remotely from an inaccessible place more than 3 times and has been told by a healthcare professional that he or she should not be in a public place because of medical or family reasons. This latter exception applies only when a Chapter 12 state of emergency has been declared, and it does expire 60 days after the emergency ends, which is a pretty narrow time window for this second type of exception to apply. So it's this last condition of public accessibility that will probably create challenges for public bodies that want to continue to hold remote meetings after the emergency and pandemic end. In other words, when a public body is holding a remote meeting under 13D.02, the location of all members must be open to the public. For example, if a city council is holding an interactive television meeting under 13D.02, and some of the city council members plan to attend the meeting via their computer while at home, then the council members' homes would need to be open to anyone from the public who wanted to attend the meeting from that specific location. Certainly, this is an option, but I suspect most public body members may be a bit hesitant to open their homes or other generally private locations to the public in this way. A couple of final notes about 13D.02. Public bodies, once again, must, to the extent practical, permit members of the public to monitor the meeting remotely. Also, the public body must notice the location of the regular meeting as well as the location of any site where a member will be participating via interactive television. So if a city council member was participating from home, you'd need to notice the council member's home address as a place where the public could participate in this, or attend to this meeting. So overall, the conditions to hold remote meetings under 13D.015 and 13D.02 are similar to the conditions of 13D.021. But there are some very important distinctions that you'll need to observe. Notably, 13D.015 permits only state-level entities to hold telephone meetings. Meanwhile, interactive television meetings held under 13D.02 does require all locations where a member is present to be open to the public. Okay, before moving into the Q&A session, I just wanted to provide answers to some questions we've seen a handful of times over the past few months. So the first question we've seen quite a bit. We need to close a portion of our meeting as permitted by the open meeting law. What's the best way to do that while meeting remotely under 13D.021? This is a good question, but it does fall a bit outside of the scope of our office because it's really a technology question rather than an open meeting law question. And the answer may depend on your technological capabilities. We've heard that some public bodies have scheduled 2 separate meetings through their meeting platform, one for the public portion of the meeting where links to access the meeting are publicized, and a separate meeting that is for the closed session where access information is provided only to members of the public body. Alternatively, some meeting technologies do allow public bodies to create virtual lobbies where public members can wait while a closed session is happening. Additionally, other public bodies have waited until the very end of a remote meeting to hold a closed session, which would allow members of the public to leave after all public business conducted during the open meeting has concluded. However, we do generally encourage public bodies to come out of their closed sessions when ending meetings, so setting up your remote meeting in a way that you can return to an open session is probably a best practice. Ultimately, there's not a single correct way to handle closed meetings remotely, and you'll need to find a way that works best for your public body. Okay, let's go to a second question we've seen a few times. Do we still need to reserve time for public comments during our remote meeting? This is another good question. If you've attended some of our previous webinars or workshops, you probably recall that the public's right to speak at an open meeting is one of the myths and misconceptions of the open meeting law. Generally, the open meeting law gives the public the right to attend meetings of public bodies in order to watch and listen to proceedings. And the law does not grant members of the public the right to speak at an open meeting. So, the open meeting law does not require that you reserve time for public comments during a remote meeting. That said, if your public body's in-person meetings had included time for public comment, it's probably worthwhile to consider ways that you might provide the public with the opportunity to speak during remote meetings. Again, this may depend on your technological capabilities, and there's probably multiple ways to allow the public to speak or provide comment during your meetings. Okay, one more question. Can we post links and resources in the platform's chat function for our members while the open meeting is ongoing? Just to clarify, a lot of remote meeting platforms like Zoom and WebEx have a chat function which allows for written discussion among meeting attendees. Depending on the way you've set up a remote meeting on these platforms, it's possible that this chat function might be available or viewable for only the public body members and not to the general public. So this ends up being a bit of a tricky question. 13D.021 requires that the public be able to hear all discussion and testimony as well as votes by members, and the section does not specifically bar using that chat function to provide members with different resources or links to the information under discussion. However, the public body would probably run afoul of the open meeting law if members started a discussion about business in the chat while the meeting is ongoing, which might be easy to slip up and do. One other consideration is that although this might be technically permissible, it may also raise eyebrows or other types of concerns about general transparency if information is being shared during a meeting, but the public is not aware of the sharing. So the open meeting law doesn't specifically forbid using chat functions in this way, and it really comes down to a risk assessment for a public body on whether to use a chat function for these types of procedural issues or sharing resources. Okay, we'll be turning to the Q&A portion of the webinar next, so please feel free to start sending in your questions. Again, send them to all panelists. But before we do turn to that, I just wanted to remind everyone that we do have some specific resources available on our website about data practices and open meeting law requirements during a state of emergency. You can find all of the resources by clicking on the link that's near the top of the Data Practices Office website homepage. There's some specific information that our office has created, as well as links to some additional online resources that others have put together. And of course, you can always give us a call or send us an email with any specific questions you have. We're always happy to help. Okay, now we'll open it up for your questions, so feel free to send those in. If you do have a question, please send it to all panelists in the Q&A panel. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, we'll also follow up with you afterwards. As we're answering questions, I'm also going to make the PowerPoint slides available again while we're taking those questions, so anyone can download those if they missed it the first time. The slides will also be available on our website within the next day or so. As we're going along answering questions, if you hear a pause or a silence, don't worry, your audio is still probably working. We're just making sure that we're getting to all the questions and reviewing them, so please keep sending those in.
Okay, so one of the questions that came in while we were discussing 13D.021 meetings is how much notice must be given to the public of the links to access these meetings? So notice is covered under 13D.021 subdivision 4, where it says that if you're holding a meeting under 13D.021, so via telephone or other electronic means, whether it's a regular, special, emergency meeting, you have to provide notice of the regular meeting location, the fact that some members might participate electronically, and the provisions of subdivision 3. So that's that remote monitoring requirement. And then the timing and method of the notice is still the same as any other meeting notices that you would have to notice under the meeting law. And those are governed under 13D.04. And what 13D.04 says is that for special meetings, which are also include regular meetings where you've changed the meeting location, you have to give notice at least 3 days in advance. For other regular meetings, you just have to keep the schedule of regular meetings on file at its primary offices. Arguably, if you're changing the meeting location to meet remotely, and that includes links to the virtual meetings, you'd probably want to at least meet those special meeting requirements that require 3 days notice before the meeting. Okay, another question is, what are the responsibilities of the entity related to technical issues? Can the entity continue to hold its meeting when there are issues with the technology that preclude the public from hearing or observing the meeting? So this is a tricky question. If you're holding a virtual meeting, the public body members must also see and hear each other as well, and they're likely attending remotely. So technical issues may impact their ability to see and hear. I'm not sure what issues may only affect the public and not the public body members. And so you may be precluded just because of the public body members not being able to see and hear each other. If there are members of the public who are having their own technical issues, you know, that's where you don't have control over that situation. There's always going to be audio difficulties where members of the public might not be able to connect due to their own internet connection or technical difficulties. You're limited in your ability to control those, but I'd say it's a risk assessment on how you proceed if there's specific technical issues that limit or preclude some members of the public from observing or hearing.
Okay, we do have a question, 13D referring to interactive, 13D.02 referring to interactive TV, whether it includes new technology like audio or visual or video conferencing calling. The answer is yes, and so, things like Skype, WebEx, Zoom, those are included in that, interactive TV. And again, those advisory opinions that you'll want to take a look at, just kind of to get kind of a background on that, are 13-009 and 18-019. So 13-009 and 18-019.
There's a question that says, what if we hold our public meeting on site, but there are members of the public who want to attend and we are able to accommodate for social distancing? We have extra obligations to the additional members of the public who want to attend. This is a tricky question. The open meeting law doesn't cover the amount of attendees that must be able to attend at the open meeting location. It falls outside the scope of what the open meeting law requires. I know that some rooms, they do have limits for attendees for fire purposes, that sort of thing, but the open meeting law doesn't go into that. And so I think being as transparent as possible, and if you are able to provide additional ways of monitoring, that would be helpful. If you're holding a virtual meeting, however, this is a kind of a different situation. 13D.02 virtual meetings covers electronic meetings, and so it's assuming that the board or the public body is attending remotely as well, where there may be one person attending on site. But if the board is meeting remotely, the individuals who are attending the meeting should also be able to review remotely as well.
Okay, I want to take just one quick moment to jump in here quick too. Because we'll answer a few more questions, I think, because we still have a couple of more minutes. But I am going to open a poll just kind of as a survey to see how we did today and about the presentation, about the content. And then also I'll give you an opportunity to provide some feedback on what you'd like to see in the future. And so this poll will really help us kind of shape and improve our webinars in the future, and then also give us some ideas for what we should be covering going forward. So I'm opening that right now.
While you're filling out the poll, I'll keep answering some questions that have come in. The next question is, one of the conditions for meetings by electronic means is all votes are conducted by roll call. The members within our agency are questioning if this applies to more or less controversial votes, such as approval of meeting minutes. What's the requirement? The plain language just says all votes must be conducted by roll call. So it doesn't say that if there's a unanimous vote, you don't have to do it. Even if there's a unanimous vote or not a controversial vote, it still needs to be conducted by roll call to meet that requirement.
Okay, we have someone asking if we could go over the exception under 13D.021 for one member of the public body requirement. People being a member of the public body being present at the regular meeting location. And so those requirements are waived if the language is unfeasible due to the health pandemic or emergency declaration. And so really what that means is that if it's not feasible for, members of the public or members of your public body to gather together in a single location or having someone, at a location, then it's not required that you actually have someone in that regular meeting location. Given the fact that we do have an ongoing pandemic and it's transferred, the virus is transferred by people being in close proximity to one another, having people at a regular meeting location does seem like it's not feasible at this point. So that's kind of the standard is, whether it's not feasible for people to gather together at their regular meeting location. And that's what you'd be looking for on that. But given the state of the pandemic and the emergency orders at this point, that requirement is probably satisfied.
There's another follow-up on the question. One second here. There's a follow-up on the question, if an entity is meeting in person but requires the public to attend remotely, are there technical issues causing the public to be unable to hear? The meeting, can they continue the meeting? So there is not a type of remote meeting that would allow the public body to meet in person and then require the public to attend remotely. 13D.021 is for meetings via electronic means or via telephone. And so the first requirement of 13D.021 is that the public body makes a determination that it's not practical or prudent because of the health pandemic to have that in-person meeting. So if they make that determination to hold those meetings under 13D.021, the public body itself wouldn't be meeting in person. And so the public body would be attending via electronic means. And so the members of the public would also be able to monitor electronically.
Okay, so we're at about time for the webinar today, and so if you could go ahead and fill out that poll and that survey, giving us a little bit of feedback today, that would be fantastic. If we didn't get to your question, we've got a record of them. We're writing them down, and so if you didn't hear from us with your question, we will follow up with you and send you an email and get in touch to answer that question for you. So thanks again for joining us. And please fill out that survey before leaving. Otherwise, have a great day. Thanks.